ICQPodcast episode 490, Ham Radio ATUs. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 490 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we're going to be joining Martin M1MRB, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Ed DD5 Lima Papa, and Frank K4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel to discuss the latest Amateur Radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a look at Ham Radio ATUs. Well, as always, it's your very kind support of your ICQ podcast that keeps us producing away and, as I say, giving you your episodes at least every fortnight, as we've been doing for the last 18 years. So if you would like to support us along with our monthly and subscription donors, we'd ask you to consider showing the value you find from the show by visiting our very important webpage, ICQPodcast.com/donate, where say all your donations go towards the running costs of the ICQ podcast and keeping us advert free. So please do consider showing that value today. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Caryn, Ed and Frank to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including historic International Space Station contact and APRS added to family Dxpedition. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ Podcast, episode 490. This is the news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, we're a slightly different crew, but we're still going to have fun. I have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin. Happy August.
Yeah, happy August. Lots goes on in August, so that's a good one. Also, we got over there in Germany, Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hi, Martin. And hey, 490, only 10 to go to 500.
That's correct. Also, well, before I bring our last presenter in, Edmund's wife has not been very well over the last couple of weeks, and he's at home looking after her, so that's why Edmund's not with us. And Mr. Dan Romacek is in the air at the moment, flying, so he's on his way to...
DEF CON is the thing he's going to teach the course for the license.
Yeah. And Dan has just released his latest copy of the technician licensing manual. So, it looks very good, Dan, I must admit. But, not leaving him out in the cold, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, has joined us tonight to fill the numbers. So, hi, Frank.
Hello, everybody. I guess I'm playing Kenny Rogers tonight. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. And good to be with the group here on this team.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself, Frank, because the whole team is great to work with and always fun. Right, let's start our first news story. First news story, father and son are doing a Dxpedition and add APRS to the mission. So I think it's really great when father and son or father and daughter or mother and son, a family, when radio's a family thing, but then they go on to a Dxpedition. Caryn, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I have to say, this is not your average family vacation. Dark, SP9DLM, with his 13-year-old son, they're traveling, as they often do, throughout the region. They are from Poland originally, and they are traveling through Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and the region there. They're doing activations. They're going to make DX contacts, or they certainly hope to. They're doing that. They're there right now. But they combine this trip with the establishment and the broadening of APRS networks, giving regions that have nothing of this sort, setting them up. And what they do is they connect with other hams in the region, and they provide them with the hardware, which they have purchased out of their own pocket. So this is being done at their own expense. They give them the equipment, they help them with the setup, they ensure that APRS can be functioning in that region, and then they move on to the next location. So they're basically networking with the local hams, helping them, activating and traveling. I'm sure this is not a cheap trip for them. The Dxpeditions, by and large, involve some investment, although this is not a remote island, so there's not that expense, but there is the expense of getting the hardware. And that's probably as much investment as the actual travel. So they'll be doing that right up through he and his son Greg, SN9GM. They're going to be on the air on and off through the 15th of August. So if you are hearing this podcast, you can listen for both of them. They're going to be busy off the air. They're going to be busy on the air. When you listen for them on the air, listen for UK Stroke SP9DLM and UK Stroke SN9GM. Okay, they'll be calling QRZ when they're not working with APRS and the LoRa gateways in order to get folks up to speed on that. This should be a big help too for a lot of the balloons that people launch that end up going over that region and end up in a black hole. But again, I just find it remarkable that they are doing this from their heart. They really truly believe in what they're doing, and by that I don't mean the Dxpedition, but by this gift that they're giving to the amateur radio community in that region. I think it's terrific. Okay, that's all I have to say about that, and I hope to hear back from them, since Newsline did cover their departure about a week or two ago. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, so it sounds fun. They're going to be very busy. Now, I know we've covered it recently on the podcast, but APRS is not only tracking individuals or items from A to B. You can also send text messages for it. There are a number of stations that act as weather stations that are quite useful to have when you can look up on a map and see a weather station and find out what the weather's like in a particular area. So there's a lot more to APRS than just tracking the movement of an item. So worth looking at. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just on that, APRS stands for Automatic Packet Relay System, I think, not position. So that's the point there. It's any kind of data, or it's lots of kinds of data. On the use in balloons will use either Whisper or APRS. But the more modern ones, the very new ones, are starting to use APRS with LoRa, which is what this network expansion is all about. So different frequencies, different technologies, but the principle's the same. And the same problem if you want to track a balloon and it's out of range of the next point receiving your signal on whichever mode, then you're not going to know where it's going and you may never see it again. You know, it's good, but not just that, but also to put in what is actually a data network in a country where they didn't have it before. That's quite a challenge that that Derek and his son are doing. No, hang on, which way around is it? Derek, yes. Greg is his son. So well done to them. And they've done it before in other countries. So let's hope it all goes without any glitches, any technical problems, and that the equipment there works for a good time into the future. And well done to these two for doing this. The fact that they're also doing a Dxpedition while they're on the road, hopefully that's to give them some relaxation after the daily work of all the electronics installation, radio installation, and configuration of the APRS LoRa network. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, sounds like it's going to be interesting. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one? It sounds interesting, doesn't it?
It does, and I echo the sentiments of the two previous presenters. You know, Bob Breninga's got a special place in my heart. Only one of the reasons is APRS. The other is he did his master's at the Georgia Institute of Technology, which has kind of been my childhood university, so to speak. And Bob passed away in 2022 from a bout with cancer that he lost. He had originally programmed that system on an Apple II, and I'm sure some of us here certainly remember, the old Apple II days. So he was a Navy officer and taught at the Naval Academy and designed it to track a football as the Army and Navy service academies played football. And you think, oh, gee, well, that's silly. Well, no, it's a good proof of concept. And we track a lot of things, particularly in races and things like that, using APRS trackers today. Since its passing, the APRS Foundation has been formed, and I think there's been a good bit of innovation in the automatic package reporting or packet reporting system. To remind our viewers or listeners who are not so much engaged in it, there is a digital repeater that will capture beacons in reception and then retransmit them. And there is a tool or system called an internet gate or iGate that gets those packets in certain formats into the internet and back to a warehouse. The motherlode APRS.FI has been that warehouse for a decade or two now. If you take this story and put it in context and look at APRS.FI, once you get out of Europe and go east, you might see one or two digipeaters and there'll be some data there, but it's very, very sparse. And only when you get to the Pacific Rim does that pick back up, with the possible exception of Mumbai and some of the tech centers in India. It's very scattered. So they are bringing an important part of infrastructure to that particular region and amateur radio operators there. The development of other abilities, such as the weather stations that Martin mentioned. That's the difference with the internet-based database versus the amateur radio licensed transmitters and corresponding receivers. We can get some other data into the overall database that doesn't necessarily come from amateur radio operators, and they can lend value greatly. Over here in the States, some of those backyard weather stations that are putting their data in through an iGate and getting it out there give micrometeorology, as our weather people on the TV stations over here, they look at that to see, okay, has the barometer dropped suddenly and at this point? Is the tornado that we think is touching down, are there characteristics that show up in this? And many meteorologists began to use this. So bringing that to that part of the world, I just sit here and virtually clap for what they're doing. Hope they have a great time. Hope they're safe, and hopefully they'll work some stations in their Dxpedition. But the long-standing thing, after the QSL cards are transferred, this will have a long-lasting effect.
Yeah, it certainly will, Frank. And I've played with APRS on and off for a long time. Thoroughly enjoy playing with it when I do. You mentioned one other thing, though, Frank, about Apple IIs. I still own two Apple IIs, an Apple II Euro and an Apple IIe. And I'm that old. I was working for a company that was networking them before the IBM PC came out. So, sorry about that.
Well, that Apple IIe is what gave many corporate accountants the motivation to go buy one and bring it to work each day, because they could get the mainframe Ed knows this well and can probably still smell the print on some of them if he's like me. The green and white bar paper and taking key numbers, building their own spreadsheet with, yes, VisiCalc to get their work done using that Apple IIe. They were good times.
Yeah, different times, but they were good. Right, move to our next news story. And Space Station logs historic first APRS contact with Kenya. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I will do, because this is one that's actually hot off the presses this year. It actually happened today, and it's actually sponsored by the Kenya Space Agency, which I believe has only been around maybe 2 or 3 years themselves. And it points to the African nations starting to get into using space to help themselves on Earth. Things like watching for agriculture, watching obviously for bad weather, and these kind of things, rather than relying on other people supplying them information or not from other countries. They made the decision, the Kenyan government, that they now want to get into some level of involvement in space. It's really rather nice that so early on in this scheme, they've realised that if they're going to do that, they're going to need people from school that are interested to get involved. And therefore, this amateur radio on the International Space Station contact was set up. And, of course, lots of local publicity around Kenya about it. And the school kids actually managed 11 questions. It's often 10 or 11 is the maximum you'll get in the pass. What is actually really brilliant, the astronaut, Sophie Ardenaut, KJ5LTN, she was so enthusiastic and, it really gave good answers. Okay, they're all prepared because they have the questions beforehand, but the whole presentation and everything else went very well. The kids had a great time. And I think the publicity, not only for space industry in Kenya, but for amateur radio, has taken a good step forward with what happened today. It's up on YouTube. The link is in the show notes. Definitely worth a look. The actual start of the QSO is about 2 hours, 25 minutes in. Before that, you've got a lot of things about the Kenyan Space Organisation and the school and various background things, as you normally do in these kind of events. So it's worth a watch. The whole thing's worth a watch, but if you don't have the time, skip forward to 2 hours, 25 minutes, and then you get the actual 20 minutes or whatever of the pass. It was done via a telebridge. The actual ground station was ON4SS in Belgium. And indeed, Sophie used the call OR4ISS, so the Belgian call from the space station. So really, a really nice, positive story. And yeah, I've just seen here the space agency was actually founded initially in 2017. So they are still very, very young in this area. And the fact they're getting schools involved can only be good. Back to you, Martin.
Oh, yeah. So, as I say, it's nice that other parts of the world are getting the chance to communicate. I mean, I know the US and the UK do it quite regularly, but it's nice others do. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
What a great way to recruit future engineers, future mathematicians, future tech workers, future scientists, future researchers. Watching that YouTube video, I was so impressed with what the kids had to say afterward. And anybody who's going to watch it on the YouTube channel, and I encourage you to do so, stick around after the QSO and listen to what the kids have to say. This is beautiful. The kids were excited. They were articulate. And they were motivated. Well, that's the whole point of what is going on here. Obviously, amateur radio on the International Space Station is supposed to do this. It fires the kids up. It lights a spark underneath them. But for this to be happening in Kenya, where there is a still growing space agency with exactly this mission to grow the industry and to use the industry toward greater economy and improvements throughout the country. Well, this just fits right in there. As much as I'm inspired each time I see an APRS contact, the light in the eyes of these kids was just brilliant. It was just wonderful. Gosh, I sure hope after the ISS is out of the sky, I hope there's another program that will very, very quickly take its place, because I would hate to see something like this go away. This real APRS is such a gift. It truly is. Back to you, Martin.
Oh, yes, yeah. And as you say, this is something where the youngsters will have a contact with the International Space Station, and then they will forever remember this for the rest of their lives and tell children and grandchildren about this. So it's great promotional. Frank, what's your ideas on this one?
I agree with what's been said. It's truly an inspiring story. And for me, who taught many men and women over the years as a college professor, to have a woman, Sophie Adno, in this case, be an astronaut and be the focus for particularly students in a country like Kenya that is approaching development and has aspirations to move further in developing its country, its economy, its education system, to let particularly young girls and also the boys see that a woman can be in space just like a man and can be talking to them. I think there are so many things that we talk about making changes. There's nothing like walking that walk and having that change. So I'm very exhilarated by the fact that in this case, it's a woman astronaut, which says so much, particularly to countries in Africa. Briefly, my wife is involved through a church ministry of making dresses for girls coming of age in another African country. And many don't have clothes and they can't go to school. That changes their life forever if they're out of school at that point in their life. So I look at it in that framework of social development, and it's a terrific story for amateur radio, but it simply underscores what you can do if you aim high and dream. As a young boy in a project called Project Talent, which came about after the Russian Sputnik satellite here in the U.S., we got to catch the Russians. We got to catch the Soviets. I was in a special class, and Dr. Joanne Mayberry, whose son Randy and I were in the same grade, we played basketball together and still friends today. When she brought something very sophisticated called a Geiger counter into class and brought out some radiating material, I noticed the family show, Martin, but I probably wet my pants as a 6 or 7 year old with that. Just imagine what these young students in Nairobi felt during this APRS experience. And I agree with Caryn. APRS itself is a gift. I hope it can keep on giving.
Oh, yes, Frank. And as I say, let's hope it does, because there is a lot to be gained from this, not only for our hobby, but for society in general. Moving to our next news story, the UK's leading observatory marked for shutdown. Now, if I mention Jodrell Bank to a UK person, they all know where it is and what it is. They're talking about shutting down a group of 7 radio telescopes in the UK due to lack of funding. And it said it could all be stopped by the 1st of April 2028. Now, that date worries me a little bit, but I don't believe this is an April Fool's joke. You know, it's quite old, the device, but it worries me that we are potentially going to lose it. Let's pass it to Frank first, because you haven't had to go first yet, Frank. What do you think on this one?
This is a puzzle, and to some degree, I'm operating on presumption, and I'll apologize ahead of time if some of that's wrong. In our rehearsal, we talked a bit about the Jodrell Bank as well as eMerlin, which is a network, and it has a website, and one can go look at that. And there are quite a number of radio telescopes, and eMerlin, ironically, has just had a major upgrade with high-speed fiber. Now, I'm familiar with networks like this and have worked with them, primarily a supercomputing network, and being involved in laying fiber and things in a university setting. So you scale that up to something like this. At first, I thought this was one of the links in that network, and okay, it goes down, but the rest of it continues. And I was wrong about that, because as I've read this more carefully, it's the gathering hub. It is where you have a spoke and wheel. It is that center part where all things come to it. And so that would be a real loss from this site. And I'm just not sure why. It's a historical site. I'm sure Ed and Caryn will talk a bit about that, as you might, Martin. But it's just a real puzzle as to why they're doing this. If they were doing this because we've got a new, bigger, better, faster one coming online, and we'll just have a couple of years gap, and then we'll be on to the next generation. I don't see any news coverage of that. But it will be a big loss for the United Kingdom, at least from this news story.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frankie. I think it will be a big loss. But people, the bean counters do what the bean counters do. Caryn, I know it's a UK story, but what's your thoughts?
Well, I was pretty horrified when this story came my way, because how can this be? That's the first thing I thought. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's respected. People work there. I think there are like close to 30 jobs there. But what they do there has an impact on thousands of scientists who rely on that site for their research. So there is a ripple effect. I want to just inject a ray of hope that, yes, it's marked for closure on April Fool's Day, as you noted appropriately, in 2028. And I believe there was a news clip I found that said, unless alternate funding can be found. Well, now, this kind of money is not easy to come by, admittedly, but fundraising can be done. Hopefully, they will concentrate on that. What is particularly appealing to me, and again, let's focus on the ray of hope here, if we can, just so we're not total downers. This is a much loved, much respected, and important site. More than 150 very prominent people have decried this as foolish, and have asked that there be funding found somewhere. Some of them include the astronaut Tim Peake, and the daughter of the founder of that site, Sir Bernard Lovell, Judy Spence, they've all signed a letter. A number of prominent professors, someone from Scotland Astronomy. So there's really an outcry over this. This is not, if this goes away, I can assure you it will not go away quietly. But I'd like to believe that there's enough pushback that there will be funding found. What angers me is that this has to happen at all. Once again, I think, Martin, you said something about bean counters, or Frank, one of you said something about bean counters. And yeah,
I
the
think it
bean
was Martin.
counters. Oh, okay. Well, I have to say, bean counters seem to rule the world, but this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's more than that. It's a piece of history, it's a piece of science, and it is a piece of our future. Let's not go cheap on this, folks. That's how I feel.
Caryn, if I can
Okay.
amplify just one
Yeah.
second what you're talking about, the UK Research Initiative, I like it, research and innovation rather. I liken it to our National Science Foundation, and I've worked with NSF and National Institutes of Health. I saw this as you were talking and discussing this, and one thing jumped out at me. One of the most dangerous things that a funding organization can have is a new chief executive officer. And I suspect that part of what's going on here, I don't know the person, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus unless they sort of need to be pushed a little bit, but the point is, when you have someone and you have a new strategy, the things that you've been doing same old get put on the chopping block. But we don't measure change accurately unless we do it the same old way every time. And I'll lay it there, Caryn.
Okay, thank you for that. That's not insignificant at all, Frank. Thank you for raising that. Yeah, that's certainly one good explanation. And gosh, where will the future be without this place? It's very short-sighted on the part of the leadership, if that indeed is the direction it's taking. So thanks for that perspective. Okay, Martin, take it away.
Well, I'm not going down there and put it in the back of my car, bring it home, but I'll pass it around to Ed for his comments. What do you think, Ed?
Okay, the one point that hasn't been covered so far is the reason behind the problem on funding is because of a different project being given priority by the bean counters. And so they've taken money from this existing project to give to a different project. I'm not sure which project that is, but that's certainly what I've read on this one. And you've got to really question whether that was a good decision. Obviously, the people on the other project are going, yeah, great, we got the money now. But this is a UNESCO protected building, so they can't actually knock it down and sell it as housing or farming land. It has to stay. So it's not a matter of they're hoping to get money back from it. They're just cutting back on the money that it would normally get. And the complete network, in fact, the e-mailing network. And that, maybe has sort of been half suggested here. Perhaps this statement has been put out so that they have some manoeuvring power, should we say, to hopefully get a larger piece or an acceptably sized piece of the budget so that it can continue. Jodrell Bank is well known. It's in history. It's 70 years old. The fact that it's just been upgraded to fibre networking, that's nothing particularly special. Most connectivity in businesses around Europe today is fibre networked, and in some ways it costs less than maintaining the older technologies. So I don't believe that's been a factor in the fact that it's not getting its normal cut of the budget from 2028 onwards, or whenever it is, 2028, 1st of April could be the start of a internal financial year in the civil service. Trying to remember. So I don't think the 1st of April is an April Fool's joke either. It's more likely a financial quarter or a financial end of year. we'll have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully the fact that so many famous people and so many organisations have now stood up and said, you can't do this, will mean that the money that's required will be found. But there's no guarantees in this world, of course. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I hope they do reallocate the money or find the money for this, because, as you say, it's part of our history. It's part of the UK can take part in other things with our radio telescopes and all those sort of things. And the scientists that are working, if this disappears, this is going to kill off a lot of scientific research. So, yeah, I'm hoping it does get sorted fairly soon. Right, moving to our last news story. And I'm going to give this one back to Ed because it only went in a few hours ago. But an incredible experience in the Austrian Alps, no less. This is the Jota guys. Ed, I'm going to let you tell everybody about this one. Round to you.
Yeah, youngsters on the air. We actually talked about this in the last ICQ podcast that this group was on, saying it was coming up. And basically what we're saying now is this is a short thing. Read the notes on the website. It's been very, very successful. And one of the key items in it was, again, another ARIS contact, an amateur radio on the International Space Station. And guess who was on the microphone from the space station again? It was Sophie Ardenau, KJ5LTN again. And she seems to really enjoy speaking with the young people. So let's hope that when she comes back down to Earth, she actually uses that call sign and gets on the air herself. And perhaps with work with schools or whatever she feels she likes to do, because she's really a very positive influence. Apart from that, it was a complete packed week. There's 94 attendees. It was near Salzburg in Austria. And yeah, the youth on the air, or youngsters on the air as we call it in Europe, this is the Region 1. There's a Region 2 Youth on the Air camp, and I believe this last year was one in Region 3 as well. Very positive, again, getting the message out to children, but doing it or young people, I should say, actually not children, doing it in such a way that they actually learn through it. And what has happened in the past is a lot of people who have attended the Jota camps have gone back and then got involved spreading the word further themselves. So it's almost like a train the trainers. Yeah, what can we say? The key point for a lot of them may have been the ISS contact. Also, a friend of the podcast that we always interview when we see him, QRP Labs, and Hans Summers, G0UPL, was there and helped all 49, was it, campuses? 94 campers build QMX Plus transceivers. So they got those to take home with them, and they also used them actually from a SOTA summit, I believe. So a really great week, not just technical, but also these are different nations, people, youngsters from different nations working together, getting to know each other, learning a little bit perhaps about diplomacy, learning about each other's lifestyles back home. And yeah, a real life-changing moment, I'm sure, for all of the 94 attendees there. So well done to the organisers behind it, which is the IARU Region 1 youth team, and also obviously the local team in Austria that got together with them to do this. And yeah, I think some of their feelings going home will be even higher than the 2,000 metres where they were camping above sea level. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I'm sure they thoroughly enjoyed themselves. In fact, when Jota was held in the UK, Martin Rothwell and I went over to Gilwell Park to interview a few people, and the smile on the different people's faces, and all the youngsters are working together. So very, very good. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Oh, I echo what Ed said. I think he did a great job in summarizing that. We don't know because we don't have a program to evaluate programs like this. They are what we call in the business a one-shot case study. And in this case, we've got multiple shots. It would be wonderful at some time if we could follow up all of the YOTA participants a decade or so later and just see how many became hams or continued in amateur radio or just whatever they did. This is just another example about this particular program and getting particularly astronauts involved, because I've said this on the podcast a number of times. When I'm in the equivalent of a elevator, it doesn't have to be in one, but the brief elevator speech. Oh, hey, ham radio, do people do that? What is that? When I say, we do a number of things, we talk to the International Space Station. That's the drop dead moment. I've never had anyone go, so what? That's something that's a calling card that every non-amateur sits up and takes attention, pays attention to. So good on the program. Good for Sophie Adno and what she's doing, and I hope she continues her role as an educator.
Yeah, she seems a great lady on that one. Caryn, last words on this one?
Last words. The green-eyed monster here, which is me. I am so jealous of these kids. Where's Oldies on the air? I'm waiting. Ed, you and I have talked about that. We want something for old and grumpy up in the mountains. We might need a little help getting up the mountains, but I think we should do an Oldies on the air summer camp, or even a spring camp if summer is too hot for us. This was really something. I have to say, reading this and all of the kids and the blog that came out as a result of this time together, this is the essence of amateur radio. It's distilled down to a couple of days. It's POTA, it's SOTA, it's ISS, it's building, it's designing, it's fox hunting. It's some of the highlights of why we love amateur radio, and it's all distilled into this experience, in this case, in a gorgeous setting in the mountains of Austria. Now, it also has the spirit of ham radio in that it teaches, as Ed had said, it teaches the kids about one another, their cultures, their countries. I believe there were 29 countries represented, if I'm not mistaken, and some here, of course, from the United States. It wasn't all just Region 1 campers. So, it's the thrill of an eyeball QSO, even if you haven't had the QSO yet. The QSOs will follow. There are lasting friendships that are going to be made now. This is what we do. This is what a lot of us do, why we do what we do, because we're communicators and we connect with one another. And I think as long as those connections continue to be made, amateur radio will most certainly have a future. Back to you, Martin.
Oh, yes. As I say, we are a very sociable hobby, and we should be a sociable hobby, and we are communicators. We're also inquisitive, and if you're pleased to learn something. So having spoke to some of the UK people and others when it was held in the UK, I think this YOTA should continue for as long as possible, because I think it's a really, really positive thing to do. So, good one, Caryn. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we had a chat on the podcast. We always go ladies first for this group, Caryn. So, I know you've just finished, but I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Okay, well, I have not been out much to do any POTA because the temperatures have been incredibly bad here. The heat has just been too much. So we've been concentrating on staying active from the home shack. Just completed the World Cup, we were not affiliated with the World Cup. We were basically just activating for football on the air as the World Cup tournament was taking place. That ended, and that was a fabulous bit of teamwork, very complex, very active special event, massive, and a lot of talent behind the scenes, designing our website, designing our scheduling grid, designing our uploader for all of the logs, designing our awards program, and we're happy to have made our chasers very, very happy in getting the gold and silver, bronze awards. I myself had very little time to chase, so I was only, in terms of certificates, a quarter finalist, but I find great joy. I find great joy in activating and calling CQ and hearing the people come back. Now we're doing International Dog Day, which this year was combined to be International Dog Day and International Cat Day, the two efforts combining forces for the entire month of August, which I'm calling the month of Dogust. Month of Dogust. At the moment, we are up against some tough propagation, so we're struggling pretty hard, but we're getting good response when we can hear people. We are sideband and CW because we're stressing conversational modes. We want to hear people's stories, and we are hearing them. And some people are taking their dogs out to go activate with them. Some people are simply bringing their dogs into the shack. Others are just remembering their dogs who they are missing terribly. I'm in that category. We are currently without dogs here at home, but I activate as Kilo Zero DOG with my team here in the U.S. in memory of Ziggy and Poochie, who we miss terribly. We have amazing support from our originator of the event, Hans, in Latvia, operating as YL1DOG. And of course, we've added a couple of other countries. Again, we have the UK, we have Ireland, we have Germany, we have this year the Netherlands, and we will have India joining us after the 15th. So it's pretty wild. I love this event. It's just a happy event. I hope, other than the propagation, it will be stress-free. As far as another special event, I will be chasing one that I just love, which is Navajo Code Talkers. That begins on I believe, the 8th of August. I just love this event. It is a wonderful way to honor the Navajo who assisted the United States during the Second World War. A great, respectful gesture to these brave Marines. And it is organized by the son of one of the code talkers, which to me is just phenomenal. I so respect and love this event. That's it. Tonight is my usual Wednesday night CWNet with the OMIC Amateur Radio Association. That's on 40 meters. Please join us if you're a CW op of any ability, and I do mean that, of any ability. You are welcome. Come and join us at 7.039 megahertz. And here in New York, that would be at 8 p.m. local time. So I look forward to that. A good way to get the key moving and grooving and hearing other people find their way using CW. It's been busy. Okay, Martin, I'll let my friends here have the floor. Back to you.
Yeah, sounds like you've been very, very busy as well. And as I say, if everyone's here, I believe International Cats Week month is also happening at the same time, dogs and cats, although you're a dog person. And so am I. So, Edmund, I'm sorry, you didn't get much of a mention on the cats. Frank, What have you been up to? It's only been 2 weeks since you was here before. So what have you been up to?
Yes, it has only been 2 weeks, but I will give a shout out to Caryn's comment. We had a blooper that we may never publicly release, but that remains to be seen on the other team because Bill Barnes let the dogs out. So, well, good on you for your work in that particular event, and I applaud. Well, I've been planning my team's participation in the Churches and Chapels on the Air for 2026. That's coming up on September the 12th. Many of our listeners know if you're in the UK, that began in merry old England over 50 years ago. And in 2023, I sort of brought it over to the US by just promoting it and getting on the air. And the Jackson Metro Amateur Club's been doing this since then. This year, we'll be at the historic St. Mark's Episcopal Church in the small suburban town from Jackson of Raymond, Mississippi. The church was a hospital for Union soldiers. Yes, in the Deep South, a church opened their doors to be a mercy ministry hospital for Union soldiers during the Civil War. Now, St. Mark's has maintained the wooden floors, and they don't allow the repair of those floors to ever completely remove the blood stains from that hospital where soldiers were tended to on bales of cotton. And they do that to remind worshipers at that church about the tragedy that unfolded during the Civil War. My good friend and colleague Mike in 5 Delta Uniform and I'll be on the air by 8 a.m. Central Time on the 12th. It's about quitting time over across the pond, unfortunately. And if you're interested, my blog at k4fmh.com has a brief article. So as I say there, go to church on the 12th and bring a radio. Today, I took delivery of an M5 Stack Tab 5 little computing device. I think it's an ESP32, if I remember. And I'll reflash that with some firmware developed by Ham, Stefan Love, OZ1LAV. Now, he has written some superb firmware to take that little 5-inch touch screen with other options and connect it by USB to our friend Hans Sommer's QMX/QMX Plus. And it makes it a PAN adapter and a really neat user interface. You have to kind of Google this and look at it to see what I'm talking about. Now, he's adding mouse support at my request as soon as he's back from vacation. Now, once I get that up and going, I'll report how it works, and it will greatly expand the usability of Hans Sommer's terrific QMX platform. And what's more, you can access it independently of the Tab 5 with a web browser because it's got a built-in Wi-Fi capability. So I'm kind of excited about that little tinkering. I'm continuing to study U.S. parks data and to try to vet potential sites to see if there's an alternative program that allows for local parks to be activated as well as having some other innovations. Now, the small team doing this is making some real progress, and I'm really pleased with the other team members and what they're adding. We could use some other volunteers. You can reach out to me at my email shown on my K4FMH QRZ page if you're seriously interested. I will say we're calling this team a rowing rather than steering committee because there's some work involved. So take that under consideration. A couple of antenna build projects. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I finished this morning my 43-foot vertical antenna. It uses a 43-foot fiberglass telescoping pole, a steel sheet with a vertical strut or mount that unscrews, which I built from a patio umbrella stand that I bought for about $35 at one of the big box stores here in the States, Home Depot in this case. And around the edge of that square piece of steel, I drilled it out, and I have galvanized, not galvanized, but stainless steel nuts and bolts, so you can have 16 radio mount connector points, even if you have more radios than that if you want to do it. This is designed for portable operation. I have a 4-to-1 balun and a 1-to-1 choke from Palomar Engineers that'll handle up to 1,500 watts. Now, you have to keep in mind with that, that's not necessarily your power output. You really need something that'll handle much more power than you're using, because when you have the toroids there, they get some currents that can really drift into the higher spaces, even though you may only be running a small amount of power. Now, I've got it so that they can be snapped into place very easily on that vertical mount. I'm using some plastic wire hangers, C-clamps, if you will, that are epoxied and bolted back to back. So one side of the C pops onto the vertical strut, the telescoping mast pops onto the other side. So that particular sheet of steel has an MFJ 994 BRT remote tuner should I want to bypass the balun and go directly with that route. It gives me a little bit of an option. So I've got that finished this morning. I'm also putting together a 40-meter vertical beam using a pair of 33-foot fiberglass masts from MFJ. Yes, they still sell those. I bought my second one a few weeks ago when I visited Martin up in Starkville. I'm going to add a switchable phasing link using the Chrisman method. And if this works, I'll make, if it works well, I'll make one for 20 meters and use two 17-foot whips and a similar phasing harness. When you operate portable and that kind of thing, and you get your other equipment maybe put together, it's onward and upward, right, Ed? I know you've done a whole lot of innovative antenna building over your career, and I've learned a lot from your blog on those things. And finally, I'm getting ready to go to the Huntsville, Alabama Ham Fest. Now, ARL's having their national convention there this year. It's one of my very favorites. For one reason, it's in August, when it's hot as Hades here in the South, and yet it's indoors with air conditioning. And they have a hotel that I stay at where there's a walkway. And so I don't have to worry about the weather, park my car, I'm there for a couple of days, and I just don't have to worry about it. And this year there should be most all the major vendors there. Most of the ARL people will be there. Lots of really good forums. And I'm looking forward to doing that. And finally, I'm still in physical therapy for my rotator cuff surgery rehab until early September. But I've got a great rehab team at Capital Ortho here in Madison, Mississippi, and that's going very, very well. So I'm getting by, Martin.
You certainly are, Frank, and you've been busy as always, so that's a good one. Ed, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke on the podcast?
Yeah, well, strangely enough, a great lead-in there from Frank, because I've also been looking at vertical arrays, antennas, and in my case, for 20 meters through 10 meters. And there's been a bit of talk about this on various YouTube channels, and thought it was worth a look. I already had one of these what's called the red slug by most of the people on the various forums, quarter wave vertical, using the Chinese 5.6 meter telescopic whip and a small feed point slug, as they call it. So you've got the whip goes in the top of it, screws in 10 millimeter thread, SO239 on the side for the coax to the rig, and a spike to go in the ground, screws in the bottom, again 10 millimeter thread, and a clip on it to put out your radial wires. So I've had that for a while, and it's okay, it works quite well. But then I heard about these people saying, well, why don't you put a parasitic reflector behind it? By parasitic, I mean there's no connection to the second one of these. It just sits a quarter of a wavelength behind. It's a little bit longer, 7% is about what I've found. And it acts then as a reflector, so that you've actually got a certain amount of directivity from the otherwise 360 degrees vertical antenna. And it works remarkably well. I've had contacts into Australia, the US, all around Europe, and tested with the colleagues there. This is running, by the way, just QRP, 5 watts of single sideband on 20 meters and one occasion on 10 meters. It looks to be 1 to 2 S points better, both on transmit and receive, with the reflector. Theoretically, you should be able to get 6 to 7 dB, which is only 1 S point. So I'm not complaining, but the theory says one thing, and in practice, I'm actually getting better. And this whole thing packs up, along with the radio. I've got the little Zygoot G106 baby radio. That all packs into a small 25-litre backpack. And there's also space in there for food and water, etc. as well, and the logbook, and. So I've got a very, very compact and easy to transport HF station. And that is what will be going with me in a couple of weeks' time to Cyprus, where we're going to be on holiday. And this is going to get tried out from the Mediterranean beaches and see what we can get radio-wise from there. And we'll be up the other end of Cyprus this time. We're heading to Larnaca, not Paphos, and looking forward to that. It looks like vertical antenna arrays are in vogue there, Frank. Other thing I'd like to point out to the users, because it's something that it's been around a while, a website and an app for the mobile, for the handy, for the smartphone. And it's a website called fieldspotter.radio, and the app is called FieldSpotter. And you think, okay, it's showing spots of different things, but it shows spots from just about every single portable activation scheme that I've ever come across, plus some that I'd never heard of. And why is that important? Well, if you're out portable running QRP, and you need to get, let's say, 15 contacts for a bunkers on the air contact, or 10 for POTA, if conditions aren't that good, it can often be quite hard just spotting on the one scheme and calling CQ to get the number of contacts you need to actually qualify the park or the summit or whatever. A lot of people, if you call CQ, the big stations, the home stations, they're fighting against local metro noise. So anything below S7 with them, they simply don't hear you. Not all, but we can understand that happens. But other portable stations usually don't have that noise level and are usually more willing to listen for weaker stations. So, as in all of these portable schemes, the person you work that counts as a contact for the qualification doesn't have to be a chaser in that scheme. It just has to be another station. So if I'm out activating a POTA park and I need 10 contacts and it's dried up after 5 or 6, I can have a look and see, who's on SOTA that should be able to hear me? I'll give them a call and we'll exchange a contact. And that's one more for me. And it's also a chaser for SOTA for me, or all the other schemes as well. So fieldspotter.radio, because it covers them all, and they're all displayed on a map. So you can see details about the individual stations. It's a good tip for the listeners. Just go on the web to fieldspotter.radio. If you like it, you can get the app for free for your smartphone. And I'm really impressed with it, to be honest. It started off only covering 1 or 2 schemes. And I said now it's expanded to cover all the schemes I know of and a few more. And there's lots of filtering there as well, so you can say only certain band spots, certain modes, and only certain schemes if you wish. All right, that's my little advert for the free website there. Apart from that, dodging the weather here. We've had some very, very hot weather, and as I'm talking to you, I've got nature's fireworks outside. There's thunder and lightning happening all around us at the moment, so hopefully that'll bring some rain and cool the temps down. We've been up over 40 degrees in the last couple of days. Back to you, Martin, and what have you been doing?
Yeah, it sounds like you've been very busy, Ed, so very interesting as well. Well, last Saturday, the 1st of August, we had our digital talk group net. Not as many people as I would have liked joined, but I think there might be a real reason for this. We talked a few weeks ago about renewing your DMR ID, and you have to go to radioid.net and just confirm you want to keep your radio ID. If you don't do it, it just gets suspended. Now, we believed from when we covered this in the podcast before that they were going to send us an email when we were about to expire and we would just click on it. No, that ain't happening. They just expire you. Because I have 2 DMR IDs, one for my UK call sign and one for my US call sign, mine was a real problem to try and get sorted because of the guy at technical support said, Martin, you've got 2 IDs and 1 email address. Well, of course I got 1 email address. I'm one person. But anyway, not getting him. He worked hard to try and get me sorted and eventually did. It was all sorts of things like, there were lots of silly things like my American license got reactivated. And then when I talked to technical support, they deactivated it and said, you've got to give me a copy of your US license. And I had to go onto the FCC website, which went down in the middle of me trying to talk to the guys for maintenance, I think. And anyway, it took about 4 hours to get sorted. The other thing you may run up against if your IDs are gone, on the hotspots, your Pi-Star hotspots, you may find that although you technically look as though you're connected to Brandmeister, you're not actually getting things through, or you're not actually connecting to where you should. Now, if you go into the configuration and the expert, there's an entry on the command line says BM for Brandmeister API, and you need to generate a new API and install that. That fixed mine as a problem. I also was playing with, from one of the members of the club wanted to do Wires X via his hotspot. It can be done, it's a bit clunky, and I was doing that. But unfortunately, one of my radios, my shack radio, and I didn't pick up on it which one it was doing this, decided to, when you transmitted, to put you into a completely different room. So if you think of the hotspots, the ICQ talk group, everything goes into room A, and because that's how I set it up. But my Fusion radio was switching it, the Fusion side, to go into room D. Now, Fusion radios would talk to each other, but they wouldn't talk to anything else in the network, and the network wouldn't talk to them. So I know how it was, and a factory reset on that particular radio, and fiddling, I found out what the problem was. So, a bit annoying. Anyway, last Sunday I went to an event at the Ashford Windmill down in Kent. It's technically it's a rally, but it's more of just an amateur radio social. Had a great time there, and I thank John, the organiser, for organising it. If ever you get the chance in the UK to go to just off Junction 10 on the M20 on the way down into Kent, it's a great day out and real fun. Lots of nice people to talk to. And last but not least, the 16th of this month, Sutton and Sheen Club will be at Amberley Museum. It used to be called Amberley Chalk Pits Museum, but Amberley Museum, because there is a communications day. This museum is absolutely massive. It must be between 1.25 miles across. There is a narrow gauge railway that runs from one side to the other. There's vintage buses that run from one side to the other. I don't think you'd see it all in 4 visits, quite honestly. It's huge. It's a working museum. There's lots of technical stuff to see. It's a real techie museum. So looking forward to that one. So apart from that, a few other bits and pieces, but that's the main things. As I say, at one point in time last week, I was panicking a little bit that I might not have been able to get the talk group working for our talk group, digital talk group net, but it all worked out in the end for me. Some of you, if you didn't join us, you maybe need to look at your Brandmeister settings and your DMR settings to get yourself back active again. So that's it from me. All that's left for me to do is thank the guys for turning up, and I think we've had a good one today. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Thank you, Martin, and everybody have a good week ahead.
I hope so, and say look after yourself, Caryn. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Well, thank you for the invite, and I'll just hoping this storm we got outside eventually brings some rain to cool down the temperatures here.
Yeah. Now, you talk about going to Cyprus in a couple of weeks' time. I was in Cyprus, actually in Larnaca, when they had a massive downpour one day, which is so rare that there were adults in their 50s running around jumping in puddles and like children. So it's, when the rain comes, sometimes it's really sought after. And I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, for joining us and helping us tonight when we were short on bodies.
Well, thank you for having me. I certainly have Edmund's wife in my prayers, and I'm glad to hear that she's doing some better, and certainly thinking about Edmund. And there are things a lot more important than amateur radio, so it's my honor to fill in just a bit, Martin.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Edmund Spicer, hopefully he'll be back with us for the next one. His wife is improving phenomenally, and we're really happy about that. And as I said earlier, Dan's in the air on the way to do another training session, so he'll be back with us soon again. So all that's left for me to do, guys, say thanks very much, and 73's we move on to the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.ICQPodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.ICQPodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news here brief from me, Colin M6BRY. We start with news here that the HamSCI group are looking at doing their next event on the weekend of the 12th and the 14th of August. This event, which is a citizen science community program, is on the Perseids event, and as I say, it's been scheduled for the 12th, 14th of August. Also, date for your diary, they're going to be doing an event to coincide with the G-Mines Meteor shower in December on the 13th to the 15th of December. So it's a couple of interesting bits to look forward to there. Participants are open to both ways to communicate and receive, and monitor receive-only stations participating from fixed locations. So there's a lot of technical information on this for you, so we suggest that you check out the link we're going to put on the ICQ podcast webpage for you, and you can find out more information about this very important scientific event. The RSGB Examination Standards Committee has published its annual report relating to activities through 2025. The report shows that overall candidate numbers in 2025 decreased a little compared to 2024. They remain about 20% higher than predictions based on, looking at pre-COVID-19 trends. The group reports this is largely due to increased accessibility of training courses and examinations being held online. Then they have also noted as well the initial feedback received from candidates on the publication of the full level question bank has been positive. However, a few months of exam data are needed before they can look at the full impact of the measures and see them being assessed, and then consideration being given to rolling out this task to other levels of the examination group. So look, there's a full report online for you. We'll put a link to it again for you on ICQPodcast.com, and you can check out that information there. Now, special event stations are always a great opportunity to work some interesting call signs, etc. And throughout the month of August, the International Dog Day and International Cat Day special event stations will be taking place. International Cat Day being held on the 8th of August, with International Dog Day being held on August the 26th. So this event, which is sponsored in involvement with our own Edmund and Caryn, so they're involved in these special events stations, so please give them your support. Lots of cool special event stations for you to work, etc. So lots of opportunity to get some great call signs in your logbook. Right, now we head over to our features episode. Our feature is looking at ham radio ATUs. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to talk about a quick look at ATUs. This has come up from a number of questions that have been asked recently, so I thought I'd try and just give people a little bit more information. Now, I'm sorry for those of you who have been in the hobby a long time and probably know most of this backwards inside out, but the newer people coming into the hobby don't always understand how we got there, and sometimes it's worth just giving them a bit of an update. And if you're like me, you know, I might say something you don't know, or if you correct me, I might learn something as well. Hi. Okay, so antenna tuners. Well, that's a bad thing straight away. They're not tuners. They don't tune the antenna, as us people who've been in the hobby a long time know. What they do is they attempt to match the impedance of the radio to the impedance of the antenna. Now, effectively, they're there just to make the transceiver think it's got a perfect antenna and it'll be perfectly happy. That doesn't mean to say you're going to radiate particularly well. You know, doesn't mean to say you've got a massive SWR problem and it's coming back and all the reflected wave is being dumped as heat in the ATU. So, just a thought, it's not a tuner, it's a matching unit to trick the transmitter into believing it's got a perfectly good antenna. So, I think we can start off by saying that we're trying to match a 50 ohm impedance. Yeah, so we all accept that. Now, there are ways to do some of this stuff, and in fairness, there are multiple types of antenna tuners, or I'll call them tuners anyway. You can either go the manual route or the automatic route, and you can either locate them indoors or outdoors. Now, you know, just because if you're talking about an outdoor one, it might be something different, which I'll cover later on. But just because you're taking an antenna tuner unit out in the field to do portable doesn't mean to say that it won't work or won't be useful indoors at home. So just don't be put off straight away. Okay, let's look it down. So you've got manual tuners, right? So a manual tuner has usually got lots of knobs and switches on the front, and effectively you'll end up with a couple of tunable capacitors and a tunable inductor. Now, if you've got an expensive ATU, that inductor will be a roller coaster type, and it's like a variable resistor, only it's an inductor where the roller runs up and down the coil to find the best fit. But capacitors obviously are variable. But if you haven't got a rolling inductor, then often you'll have a coil with a switch that switches in different amounts of the coil. So you change the inductor by switching more or less turns on your coil into the circuit. So pretty straightforward. They're not difficult to fix. I wouldn't go poking around at the capacitors unless you really have to. You don't want to short out the contacts between the stable part and the part that moves. If you find a very old ATU and it's got corrosion and it's got corrosion on the variable capacitors, then you may have to do a lot of cleaning, and you've got to be very, very careful to get it right. If you get a short circuit, that ruins your tuning operation. And as I say, with the corrosion, they may flash over and you'll have electricity jumping over. So, you know, don't worry too much. Now, the manual tuning units, effectively, you know, they're very simple. They're either capacitors and a coil. They've usually got some form of SWR meter built into them, but not always. They don't have to have. And sometimes you'll have devices for high and low power and the such. Often manual ATUs have another ballon inside which converts from the 50 ohm impedance to 300 ohm impedance. So you can use twin feeder without having to put another device in line. So if you're using twin feeder, or you think you're going to use twin feeder, then look for that option on your ATU, manual ATU. Auto ATUs. I like auto ATUs basically because I'm lazy, but they're not always the best. Manual ATUs often tune over a much wider range. Auto ATUs, often in the major manufacturers' rigs, will only tune up to 3-to-1 SWR. If it's higher than 3-to-1, the ATU just won't give you a good match. And quite honestly, if it's over 3-to-1, you've got a major problem anyway. So just don't knock them, but they will only go as far as 3-to-1. Now, I own a Zygo G90, and that has a automatic ATU in it, and that thing appears to want to tune a piece of wet string. Very, very good auto ATU in it. You push the button, it goes chump, 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 and it pulls in particularly well for that particular radio. I also own an Aircraft portable QRP antenna tuner. That, once again, seems to want to be able to tune a piece of wet string if you really put it at it. But what it does is it protects the radio, but it doesn't mean to say you're radiating particularly well. So just be aware of that and going forward. Now, you could keep your ATU next to your antenna, or you can keep it next to your radio. Most of the time, people keep them next to the radio, and that works very well, and you adjust them as you go down the bands and whatever you're doing. However, there's no reason why you couldn't put a remote ATU at the base of the antenna. And if you do that, you're going to need extra cable, and you're not only going to have to run coax, but you'll have to run power and a control cable down to the remote ATU. But you're setting it up correctly, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are not particularly cheap, but it may work for you at your location. And as I say, quite nice little things. Now, inside most of these ATUs, there's lots of different designs. I'll give you a few of them. There's the L-type, which is basically a capacitor and an inductor, all right? And there's only two things. Now, depending on how you fit it, it either works very, very well. So an L-type can match the impedance in one direction based on where the parallel capacitor is placed. And it says here, I can shunt the capacitor on the transmitter side, and that steps down high antenna impedance to match a 50 ohms. But if I switch it around the other way, so I shunt the capacitor on the antenna side, that steps up a low antenna impedance to match the 50 ohm load. So it's a nice little device, and the L matches are usually very, very useful. They only require two components, and they don't tend to result in lots of heat loss, as in sometimes other antenna tuners do. I've used these on long wire, predominantly for QRP, but they do work. Next one is the T-match. So what does a T-match look like? Well, the T-match is effectively, when you look at the circuit diagram, you've got it set up as a T. So you've got two capacitors in series and an inductor from the middle of the capacitors to ground. So you adjust the two capacitors either side, the antenna side and the capacitor on the transmitter side, along with the inductors to ground, to get a nice 50 ohm match. And when you look at the circuit, that's what it looks like, a T match. The pi match, once again, it looks like a pi, and when you look at the circuit, you can just see it. There's an inductor that goes from the transmitter sides right through to the antenna. And from the inductor, each side of the inductor, you have a capacitor to ground. And you adjust the capacitors to help you tune in your antenna, along with you can adjust the inductor as well. So that's why they're called T-match and pi match, because when you look at the circuit, you can see it. And, you know, for those of you who are new, if you're asking an old Elmer about ATUs, just have a look at the circuit first, because you'll gain a lot of credibility if you say, I've got this T-match or I've got this pi-match antenna tuner. Lastly, I also have, sitting in the shack, a Z-match antenna tuner, and it seems to work very, very well. I'm not saying this is one of the better ones. You know, you will find which one works for you. But it's Z-matches are highly specialised. They're for resident antenna tuners, and their use is with multi-band tank circuits. So, yeah, great little device. As I say, don't be put off. They work very well. Now, this is the last bit, and probably more use for your beginners. For QRP, it is better to have a single band antenna that's cut to the correct length with the correct SWR. Therefore, no wasted power is wasted in the ATU. And, you know, I know we want to work multiple bands and all that sort of thing, but if you're only running 5 watts, you don't want to be losing 40% of your power, 2 watts into an ATU. So, okay, it might be a pain only operating on one band at a time. Doesn't mean your radio can't, but you might have to work one band at a time, but you don't waste power in other setups. And lastly, something for the beginner as well. The higher in frequency you go, the wider the bandwidth is for the SWR. So for argument's sake, if you're on 80 meters, it's almost like a V. You know, you move a few hertz either side and you've got to retune. Whereas when you get up into, say, 2 meters, 144 megs, you're literally covered a whole band without going to a high SWR. And the same with 77s is even better. So you get instead of getting a V, you get a nice slow line down and a straight, almost straight line across at the standard SWR value before it raises again. So just be aware, the lower the frequency you're operating on, the more likely or the more often you will have to keep retuning your ATU. So I hope this was of interest to some of you, and as I say, just a few things that may help some of the beginners. And for those of you who knew all this, I'm sorry, but we have to help the beginners sometimes. Thank you very much.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed Martin's feature there on ATUs and our show in general for episode 490 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast. As always, we'd like to thank our annual and monthly subscription donors for helping us pay our way and say them showing the value that they appreciate from your ICQ podcast. We'd ask you to consider supporting the show by visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate, where the value you got from today's show would be great if you can turn it into a monetary figure and send it our way to continue the work that we do here on the ICQ podcast. So please do consider us from there. While you're there, if you haven't done so already, please do sign up for our newsletter, which is a great way of keeping up to date on the things that we're up to, and keeping you abreast of, the show and the ham radio community in general. And it's a free of charge newsletter without any advertising, etc. So it's a complimentary service to your ICQ podcast. Right, well, I'll bid you all 73s and wish you a wonderful time enjoying our fantastic hobby. And as always, we'll catch you all again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.